On the wedding night, the domineering CEO threw me a 10 million check and said, "Remember, you're never worthy of bearing my child." I lowered my head and gently touched the 999 little ones just beginning to form in my belly. "Well done, human, you've successfully caught the attention of the pomegranate spirit." Pomegranate, a pomegranate tree that has cultivated into a spirit, have always had three great joys in life: basking in the sun on my mountain, eating soil, and reading romance novels. While we're at it, let's take a look at the pomegranate trees and their offspring covering the mountains and fields. That day, I had just finished tending to a batch of sprouting saplings. After dozing off for a moment, I opened my eyes to find the scene had changed. Above me was a dazzling crystal chandelier, and in front of me stood a man in a tailored suit, his face as sour as if I owed him 800 years of cultivation. A sudden rush of memories flooded my mind. Oh, I had transmigrated into a book, and not just any book, but an early-era angst-filled novel I had just been complaining about. The man in front of me was the male lead, Charles, with all the standard tropes: rich, handsome, a white moonlight in his heart, and a brain-dead conviction that every woman in the world wanted to bear his children. Now it's the classic plot. On the wedding night, throwing money at someone, a flimsy check was tossed in front of me. The man's voice cold enough to freeze fruit. 10 million, behave yourself and be a good Mrs. Green, don't even think about bearing my child. I looked down at the check, then up at his face that seemed to say, "You mere mortals dare to dream of bearing my offspring." I, a pomegranate spirit, can endure personal humiliation, but I will not tolerate insults to my racial talent. What is it that allows us pomegranates to stand tall in the spirit world? It's our fertility. More children, more blessings, is a family motto carved into our very roots, and he dares to use this to insult me. Can you tolerate this? A surge of inexplicable fury shot straight to the top of my head, more intense than a cultivation deviation. Fine, so it's Charles, is it? You think there are too many children, huh? Who do you think you're underestimating in terms of productivity? Today, I will show you what it means to be absolutely overwhelmed by sheer numbers. I secretly mobilized my innate demonic power and sensed the remnants within this body. Excellent, the materials are sufficient. I focused my will and fully activated my racial skill. Form like there's no tomorrow. The goal isn't high. Let's start with 999 treasures. A check? Take it and open a kindergarten for your family's bloodline, you idiot. Pregnancy symptoms came quickly. It wasn't vomiting, but hunger, and a deep craving for high-quality soil. The exquisite breakfast prepared by Charles's chef, I only took 2 bites before putting it down. While no one was around, I slipped into the backyard, dug up some moist soil, and tasted it. The soil quality of this estate is passable, barely edible. Charles happened to return and saw me squatting there, my hands covered in mud, his frown deep enough to trap a fly. "What are you up to again?" he said with a tone of disgust. I clapped my hands and stood up. "Supplementing trace elements for better prenatal and postnatal care," he sneered, and couldn't be bothered to respond to me. A month later, the family doctor came for his routine checkup. I lost my balance while going down the stairs and stumbled. The doctor steadied me and casually checked my pulse. Then his expression changed drastically, as if he had touched an electric switch. "Mr. Green," his voice cracked. "Madam, this is a slippery pulse." Charles didn't understand. What kind of pulse? "A joyful pulse. Madam is pregnant." The living room fell into a dead silence. Charles's face visibly darkened, turning as black as coal. He stared at me intently, his gaze like icy daggers. "You'd better explain this clearly." I blinked. "Explain what? Didn't you sow the seed yourself? A month ago, Hilton Hotel, room 3806. Do you need me to help you recall more details? You didn't seem very clear-headed at the time." His face turned even darker. He remembered. And he knew full well that in his state back then, it was impossible for him to have taken any precautions. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his grip frighteningly strong. "You're scheming against me." His voice was low and hoarse, carrying the danger of an impending outburst. I winced in pain, feeling a bit irritated. I had intended to quietly take the money and act as a mere figurehead, but he insisted on provoking my racial dignity with his bloodline. I looked up, meeting his blazing eyes directly, and said in a stiff tone, "Mr. Green, you sowed the seed, and now that the fruit has ripened, are you trying to deny responsibility? I'm telling you, these are all my babies, and they're extremely precious. You frightened them. Let go." He released me as if burned, taking a step back, his gaze shifting uncertainly to my still flat stomach. "These, what on earth?" He didn't finish his sentence. the doctor beside us was completely stunned, his mouth hanging open wide enough to fit an egg. Charles took a deep breath, his temples throbbing, clearly on the verge of a mental breakdown. To the hospital, he gritted out through clenched teeth. Now, immediately, Charles shoved me into the car, his face ashen, and remained silent the entire way. The hospital was owned by his family. They cleared the area and enforced the highest level of confidentiality. The female doctor performed the ultrasound with gentle movements and a cautious expression the moment the screen image appeared. Her hand trembled, and the probe nearly fell on me. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, and her lips began to quiver. This, she stammered for a long time but couldn't utter another word. Charles grew impatient. What's going on? The doctor turned around abruptly, his face as pale as if he had seen a ghost. Mr. Green, you should see this for yourself. Charles furrowed his brows and looked at the screen. I also tilted my head to take a look. The image was covered in dense little black dots, like pomegranate seeds, packed tightly together. The effect of the original demonic power was quite good. I was satisfied. Charles's expression froze. At first, he was confused, then disbelief set in. He leaned closer to the screen, almost pressing his face against it. He started counting, his fingers unconsciously tapping in the air. After tapping more than a dozen times, his hand froze mid-air. He abruptly turned to look at the doctor. His voice tense. How many? The doctor's voice trembled. Too many to count. The number of visible gestational sacs already far exceeds the normal count. The equipment might not even get to the point. Charles snapped. Initial estimate, at least, several dozen. The doctor nearly fainted after saying it himself. Mr. Green, this defies medical common sense. I recommend an immediate fetal reduction. No, my tone turned cold. Mess with my babies. Don't even think about it. The doctor turned a pleading gaze toward Charles. The situation is far too dangerous for the mother. It places an immense burden on her body, and the fetuses are unlikely to survive healthily. Charles's eyes swept over my flat stomach like a sharp blade before returning to the screen, where a scene of prosperity was displayed. He used to forbid me from carrying his child, but now the issue isn't whether I'm pregnant or not, it's that I'm pregnant with a whole litter. He looked like his CPU had fried, completely lost in a state of extreme confusion and bewilderment. He remained silent for a full minute, then took a deep breath as if using all his strength, his voice hoarse and strained. No reduction, keep them all, every single one, not a single one is allowed to be lost. The doctor almost knelt down on the spot. Mr. Green, this is impossible, the risks are too high. Charles, with a vacant look in his eyes, muttered to himself as if trying to convince himself. How could my child, the child of Charles, not be saved? As expected of the male lead in a brain-dead story, he sure knows how to play the part. He turned to me with a complex expression in his eyes, anger, shock, fear, and a hint of eerie resignation, as if he had given up after being forced to accept something. He paused, seemingly unsure how to ask. How do you feel? I touched my stomach and answered honestly, a little hungry. I want to eat the unfertilized soil from the back hill. Charles's expression cracked once again. He ultimately said nothing, just waved his hand to let the ashen-faced doctor leave, then walked to the window himself, looking outside. His back exuding a strong sense of disillusionment with life. He originally just didn't want to leave any future troubles. Now, the future troubles have become endless troubles. After returning from the hospital, the way Charles looked at me completely changed. What was once an eyesore of a decoration is now an incomprehensible and extremely dangerous unknown creature. He placed me in the largest master bedroom and assigned 8 servants to take turns watching me. As if I could explode on the spot at any moment, his beloved Lily soon got the news and came crying to the door. Brother Charles, I heard from the doctor, she's pregnant. How is that possible? Could it be that she... Charles sat on the sofa, rubbing his temples, ignoring her. Spread out in front of him was a pile of medical reports filled with phrases like, medical miracle, recommend further observation, and, unexplainable. I was holding a pot of potting soil freshly dug up by the servant, scooping it up with a small spoon to eat. The texture was crispy, not bad at all. Lily saw me eating soil, and her expression cracked. What is she doing? I looked up and shared kindly, replenishing nutrients. Want some? The soil under the first pine tree in the backyard tastes the best. Lily took a frightened step back. Charles finally looked up, his gaze shifting between me and the soil with a sense of curiosity. Instead of stopping me from eating soil, he instructed the butler. Go test everything. the lady has been eating, analyze the composition, trace elements, everything thoroughly. He then turned to me, trying to communicate calmly. Are you feeling unwell anywhere, besides being hungry and wanting to eat? Soil. I thought about it seriously. It's okay, I just need to get more sun. Charles furrowed his brow even more. Get more sun, yeah, to do some photosynthesis, I replied casually. Charles, Lily. Charles remained silent for a long moment before finally giving up on communication and turning to the medical team with an order: monitor her vital signs 24/7, and the condition of the fetus, report any abnormalities immediately. He no longer mentioned anything about not wanting the child. All his energy was now focused on figuring out just what exactly I was pregnant with. And what exactly I was. The doctor trembled as he spoke. Mr. Green, there are simply too many fetuses. The current equipment can't provide an exact count, but we can only monitor that their vital signs are all very active. Charles stared blankly at the flickering dots on the screen, murmuring to himself, just how many are there? I slowly dug out the last bit of soil and chimed in, probably enough to form several dozens of football teams. Charles took a deep breath, looking as if he was about to run out of oxygen. He waved his hand, signaling everyone to leave, including the sobbing Lily. Only the two of us remained in the room. He walked up to me, looking down from above, trying to intimidate me with his presence. Pomegranate, he said in a low voice, you'd better tell me the truth. What method did you actually use? I blinked, with utmost sincerity. If I said it's a racial talent, would you believe me? He clearly didn't believe it, but he couldn't find a more reasonable explanation. After all, he couldn't really believe that I was a pomegranate tree that had become a spirit. Finally, he could only grit his teeth and force out a sentence. Stay put, don't cause any trouble. He turned and walked out, his back radiating a kind of weakness that comes from having one's worldview shattered. I patted my belly and said to my little ones, see, your dad's ability to adapt isn't too bad. Charles began keeping a close watch on me. His study now has over a dozen screens that display my heart rate, blood pressure, and fetal movement frequency in real time. Although the fetal movement monitor often gets tangled up like a mess of yarn due to too many signals, a medical team is stationed at home, drawing my blood and performing ultrasounds daily, trying to count exactly how many there are. Every time an ultrasound is done, the doctor's hands tremble like a Parkinson's patient. The little dots on the screen are densely packed, like tadpoles in a summer pond, making it impossible to tell which is which. The doctor wiped his sweat and reported, Mr. Green. Today, we detected a few more heartbeats. Charles's face was expressionless. Be specific. Approximately. About 10 more than yesterday. The doctor's voice was unsteady. The pen in Charles's hand snapped with a sharp crack. He seemed to have given up on thinking about medical common sense. My daily needs have become a bit unusual, besides regularly eating soil from specific areas. I also need to sunbathe in the garden for 2 hours every day. At first, Charles thought I just enjoyed sunbathing. Until he noticed that I barely moved while under the sun. My breathing became extremely slow, and my skin even faintly glowed with a healthy, photosynthesis-like sheen. He stood by the window watching me for 10 minutes, then quietly asked his assistant to look up literature on whether humans are capable of photosynthesis. Lily is here again to seek attention, this time bringing her homemade, pregnancy tonic soup. I took a sniff and was nearly knocked out by the strong smell of additives. Thanks, but no. I pushed it away. I've been sticking to inorganic nutritional supplements lately. She looked at Charles with a pitiful expression. Charles was staring at my face, which had just been sun-kissed and looked particularly rosy and glowing, completely oblivious to her gaze. In front of her, I broke off a piece of clay pellet from the flower pot and crunched it between my teeth. Lily's expression completely fell apart. She probably thought I was crazy, or that she was going crazy. Charles finally snapped out of it and said to the butler, from now on, the lady's diet should be arranged according to her own preferences. Also, replace the clay pellets in the flower pots with edible mineral blocks. He seems to have started accepting the situation. He's even being considerate in a somewhat resigned way. The funniest part is that he's trying to do prenatal education. He reads financial news and business merger cases to the soccer team in my belly, but every time he reads for less than 5 minutes, the monitor shows the fetal heart rates collectively drop, probably because they've fallen asleep listening. Once he changed the topic and started reading from a plant guide. When he read, pomegranate, a deciduous shrub or small tree, flowering from May to July, fruiting from September to October. The heart rates of all the fetuses simultaneously jumped. Charles stared at the monitoring screen and remained silent for a full 5 minutes. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with an indescribable curiosity and confusion. I looked back at him innocently and let out a small burp, which carried a faint scent of fresh soil. Charles rubbed his temples, looking as though he desperately needed a psychiatrist. He finally couldn't hold back and asked me in a hoarse voice, "What on earth?" I waited for his question, but in the end, he didn't ask anything, just sighed and waved his hand. "Forget it," he said, "as long as it's born safely." The days flew by as I ate dirt and basked in the sun, while Charles questioned his life. My belly didn't grow to an outrageous size, just a bit more impressive than the average pregnant woman's. Charles expressed cautious optimism about this. The medical team records my data every day as if observing an alien creature. Charles has grown accustomed to hearing the doctor speak in a tone reserved for reporting major project progress during breakfast. "Mr. Green, last night, we detected 15 new fetal heartbeats, and no abnormalities have been found so far. The total number still cannot be accurately counted, but all vital signs are stable." He takes a sip of coffee expressionlessly, hums in acknowledgement, and then looks at me, who is earnestly tasting the latest batch of imported organic mineral soil. "How's the taste today?" He has actually started asking out of habit. "Not bad, just a bit high in calcium, a little gritty on the teeth," I commented objectively. He nodded and said to the butler, "Take note, next time get a batch with higher magnesium content." Lily hasn't been around for a long time. I heard she consulted several masters, and after analyzing my birth chart, they all said it was beyond their expertise and suggested she seek help elsewhere. On the due date, the weather was beautiful. After sunbathing, I felt my belly was a bit heavy. I said to Charles, who was in the middle of a video conference, "I think it's time." Charles said to the screen. Meeting paused, with the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed it countless times, without even asking for details. He scooped me up in his arms and strode toward the home birthing suite we had prepared long ago. The medical team was on high alert, the atmosphere as tense as a rocket launch. The contractions came, but they weren't too painful, more like my little ones were just eager to come out and play. Charles stood nearby, his face tense and his hands clenched into fists. The doctor stared at the monitor, his expression gradually turning to horror. "The fetus is descending too quickly. This isn't normal." "Oh my God, there's so much." I found them annoying and waved my hand. "Don't be nervous, just let it be a natural birth. They'll find their own way." The entire delivery room fell silent instantly. All the doctors and nurses looked at me as if I were a madman. Charles took a deep breath and yelled at the doctor, "Do as she says." An hour later, the first child was born smoothly, with a loud cry. The nurse had just cut the umbilical cord and hadn't caught her breath when the second one appeared. Then came the third, the fourth. The pace kept getting faster. The delivery room had turned into an assembly line. The nurses were bustling about, delivering one baby, carrying it away, and the next one immediately followed. There was simply no time to clean up or keep detailed records. Charles tried to keep count at first, but he gave up after reaching around 20. He stood there, watching as one baby after another was swiftly carried to the prepared incubator area nearby. His expression shifting from shock to numbness, the cries of the babies blended together, sounding like a pond full of frogs on a summer night. The doctor gasped as he reported, "Mr. Green, it's too fast. This has already far exceeded." Charles interrupted him, his voice unusually calm. "No need to report. Continue with the delivery." He walked to my bedside, looking at my sweat-soaked forehead with a complicated expression in his eyes. "Are you," he paused, "tired?" I took a moment to feel the pup still dwindling inside me and shook my head. "I'm all right, just a bit hungry. Can I have a good meal after giving birth? I want to eat the soil from the southeast corner of the garden. It has a smoother texture." Charles closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was only a resigned calmness left within. He said to the butler, "Go dig." The crying was deafening, and I felt my eardrums buzzing in resonance. I don't know how long it took, but the last little one slipped out smoothly. The world is quiet. Not really. The collective wailing of 999 babies is enough to lift the roof. I let out a long sigh, feeling completely drained, mostly from hunger. The doctor slumped in his chair, his eyes glazed over, muttering, "It's over." Finally, the nurses were scattered and disheveled, as if they had just fought a tough battle. Charles stared at me blankly, his Adam's apple bobbing as he tried to speak but no sound came out. He looked as though his soul had been snatched away and forcibly shoved back in. How many? His voice was hoarse and strained. A head nurse who could barely stand leaned against the wall, reporting weakly, "Mr. Green, it's impossible to count. The incubators are all full. We've added many in the hallway too. Preliminary estimates, possibly." Possibly, she reported an absurd number. Charles closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a deathly calm in his gaze. It seemed he had finally been forced to accept this surreal reality. He looked at me, 1,000 words stuck in his throat, and in the end, he only managed to squeeze out one sentence. "What flavor of dirt do you want to eat?" "A bit more moist," I replied, going along with it. He nodded and repeated to the equally stunned butler, "Bring the freshly dug soil." The moistest part. Then he turned to the sea of wailing, rubbed his throbbing temples, and with the demeanor of someone leading a cross-border merger and acquisition meeting, began issuing commands: triple the manpower, contact the formula manufacturers and acquire the production lines directly. For diapers, purchase by the ton. The crib, never mind, let's clear out a few rooms first and sleep on the floor. The assistant, pale-faced, took notes, his hand trembling so much he could barely hold the pen. Just then, a nurse came over carrying an exceptionally chubby baby. "Mr. and Mrs. Green, this baby seems a bit special." I looked over and saw the little guy clutching a strand of the nurse's hair, stuffing it into his mouth and chewing with great relish. Charles frowned. "What's wrong?" He's eating my hair." The nurse was on the verge of tears. "And he's so strong. I can't pull him off," I calmly said. "It's fine. He might be iron deficient. Just supplement with some trace minerals. Give him an iron-rich mineral chew toy instead." Charles was silent for 3 seconds, then added to his assistant, "And order another batch of infant-safe mineral chew toys." The assistant's pen slipped, drawing a long, crooked line on the notebook. Charles looked at the disastrous yet vibrant scene before him, sighed deeply, loosened his tie, and resignedly rolled up his sleeves. "I'll go see which one is crying the loudest first," he said, his tone carrying an unprecedented weariness and a strange sense of responsibility. He might not have fallen in love with me yet, but he was clearly already bound to his 999 bloodline descendants. This life, I'm completely stuck in a pile of pomegranates. The Green family villa has completely turned into a large-scale nursery. 999 little ones, their cries could lift the roof. The smell of milk mixed with a faint scent of pomegranate. This is the natural body fragrance of my children, lingering endlessly. Charles hired an entire team of 3 nannies, but it still wasn't enough. The nannies worked in 3 shifts, yet several of them ended up crying from exhaustion. Resignation letters piled up on the butler's desk, all citing the same reason: excessive mental stress and the need to see a normal world again. Charles was forced to work from home. His executive office was relocated next to the nursery, and during video conferences, the background noise was always filled with the babies wailing and the sound of nannies running around. Once, while he was sternly reprimanding a branch manager, the executives on the other end of the screen held their breath in silence. Suddenly, a loud cry pierced through the wall, followed by a nanny's exclamation. "Baby number 301 has hung himself from the chandelier again," without changing his expression. Charles said to the screen. Meeting paused for 5 minutes, then he stood up and strode out of the room. The executives on the other end of the screen looked at each other in bewilderment. Faintly, they could hear shouts of, "Mr. Green, quick, number 301 is chewing on the crystals on the chandelier," followed by Charles's resigned voice. "Get him down, give him a chew toy instead." The entire group froze in disbelief. My main tasks were to rest and eat, every day, without fail. I would bask in the sun and consume soil from specific areas. Charles seemed to accept my dietary preferences and even began researching the nutritional content of soil from different regions. His assistant's procurement list now included many peculiar items, such as Siberian permafrost samples and Hawaiian volcanic ash. The little ones grew rapidly, and each one was more robust and energetic than the last. Super strength is just the basics. Nannies often exclaim in surprise when they see a baby break the bars of a crib with their bare hands. One baby cried so intensely that tears fell onto the carpet, and the next day, a cluster of vibrant green pomegranate sprouts grew there. Another baby, seemingly impatient with the nanny's slow feeding, grabbed the bottle and gulped it down in seconds, then proceeded to crush the bottle flat. It took Charles less than a week to go from initial shock to complete numbness. He can now listen to financial report analysis while swiftly stopping a little one trying to climb the windowsill, his movements so practiced it's heartbreaking. Lily didn't give up and came back once more. She wore an exquisite white dress, intending to play the role of a gentle and understanding companion. As soon as she stepped inside, she was knocked off balance by a little one scurrying past, landing ungracefully on the floor. The little one glanced back at her, sneezed, and sprayed a few bright red pomegranate juice stains on her dress, which were impossible to wash out. Another child took a fancy to her diamond earrings, swiftly snatching them with lightning speed and immediately stuffing them into their mouth to chew on. Lily screamed as she rescued her earrings, staring at the clear teeth marks on them. Then, looking at the room full of hyperactive, oddly behaving babies, she turned pale and ran off, probably never daring to visit again. Charles showed no reaction to this. He was too busy trying to assign numbers to the children. At first, he used numerical labels, but soon realized it wouldn't work. There were too many, and it was easy to get confused. He tried to divide them by birth order, such as Zone 1 to 100 in the east, Zone 101 to 200 in the west. But once the little ones started crawling and running, they often visited each other, completely disrupting the arrangement. In the end, he gave up and could only require all nannies to memorize the faces and characteristics of every child in their assigned area. This led to the nannies frequently experiencing auditory and visual hallucinations, shouting at the air, "Number 250, stop chewing on the table leg." I finished a plate of newly arrived Australian red clay. The texture was average, a bit sour, watching Charles, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, squat on the floor and patiently pry a chewed-up solid gold paperweight from a baby's mouth. My pomegranate seed-sized conscience ached for once. "You've worked hard," I said. He looked up, faint dark circles under his eyes, his tie askew and stained with what looked suspiciously like drool. He paused for a moment, his tone calm with a sense of resignation. "It's all right, it's just a bit costly, demanding on people, and hard on the house." He paused and added, "and tough on Dad." After the babies turned 1 month old, they became even more energetic. Their cries had a certain destructive penetrating power, easily interrupting Charles's video conferences and shaking the crystal chandelier. Charles tried to solve problems with money. He bought the latest smart cradle, used top-grade soundproofing materials to decorate the nursery, and even hired a so-called team of parenting experts. It was useless. The crying continued as usual, and the destruction of the house went on as before, until one time, some kid took the lead, and the cries quickly merged into a chorus, so loud it almost lifted the roof. The nannies were at a loss, and Charles covered his ears, his face turning pale, looking as if he was about to explode on the spot. I had just finished sunbathing and was a bit thirsty, so I walked in looking for some water to drink, annoyed by the piercing noise. I instinctively furrowed my brow and let out a soft, "tsk." Instantly, the entire room fell into complete silence. All 999 children, who had been wailing just moments before, simultaneously stopped crying, turned their heads to look at me, and blinked their round, wide eyes, as obedient as a group of lifelike dolls. The nannies, who had been desperately trying to soothe the children, froze mid-motion, their arms still held in a rocking position. Charles hadn't even lowered his hands from covering his ears, his eyes wide as saucers. He looked at the suddenly quiet children, then at me, as if witnessing some kind of miracle on earth. In the dead silence, only one child couldn't hold back and let out a tiny sob-like hiccup. I swept my gaze over. The child immediately covered his mouth with his chubby hands, his eyes widening even more, shaking his head desperately to show he wouldn't make another sound. I nodded with satisfaction and continued to look for water to drink. Behind me stood Charles and a group of nannies, frozen in shock. From then on, there was something different in the way Charles looked at me. It was no longer just pure curiosity and confusion. There was a hint of indescribable awe mixed in. He began to unconsciously observe me. He observed how I could make a child who was trying to chew on the wall sheepishly put their hand down with just one look. He observed how, as long as I sat there basking in the sun, the children around would automatically stay quiet, at most daring only to crawl around softly. He tried to imitate me. Once, a little one was happily pulling his hair. Charles put down the financial report, trying to imitate my calm and indifferent gaze in an attempt to stop it with his eyes. The little one looked back at him, grinning a pure and innocent, toothless smile, and pulled even harder. Charles failed, rubbing his sore scalp. He looked at me with a complicated expression as I leisurely dug in the dirt to eat. He seemed to finally understand that some talents just can't be learned. he started consulting me about things. For example, the children in the East Corridor seem to prefer chewing on wooden furniture. Should we switch to metal ones? Or, batch 300 to 400 have recently developed a collective habit of digging at the carpets. Are they lacking some trace elements? Do we need to adjust the milk formula? His tone carried a hint of inquiry that even he himself hadn't noticed. I usually observe the situation first and then offer suggestions. No need to switch to metal. They'll give up on chewing the wood once they realize they can't get through it. Digging at the carpet is just them imitating me digging in soil. Give them some soft clay to play with instead. Surprisingly, he actually followed all of my advice. The results were remarkable. Charles looked at me with increasingly bright eyes, as if he had discovered some rare treasure, or a lifeline. One night, another baby inexplicably started crying and soon set off the entire floor of infants. The nannies were in a panic. Charles rushed over in his pajamas, trying every method to soothe them, but it seemed a full-scale riot was about to break out. He took a deep breath and strode into my room. I was sleeping groggily when he shook me awake. Pomegranate. His voice was hoarse from staying up late, with a hint of barely noticeable dependence. Do me a favor, it's starting again. I squinted my eyes, yawned, and followed him to the corridor entrance in my pajamas. Looking at the group of kids with their little faces flushed red from crying, I waved my hand weakly and said, "Quiet, go to sleep." The eerie sound stopped again instantly. The little ones yawned, rubbed their eyes, obediently crawled back into their small beds, and fell asleep in seconds. Charles stood in the sudden silence, looking at me in my pajamas with messy hair and yawning continuously. Under the dim light in the hallway, his gaze seemed somewhat fixed. He suddenly spoke, his voice very soft. "You're a bit impressive." I didn't hear clearly, too sleepy to function, and waved my hand as I walked back. "No big deal. Next time, don't disturb me for something like this. They'll fall asleep once they cry themselves out." He stood there motionless, watching my unsteady figure retreat to the room for a long time. Later, I heard from the nanny that Mr. Green stood alone in the quiet hallway for half the night that evening. When the cubs were 3 months old, their destructive power grew exponentially. Charles's study became a disaster zone. Documents were shredded into a carpet, pens were disassembled into parts, and one cub was trying to stuff a computer motherboard into its mouth. Charles tried to reason with it, lifting the cub in front of him and giving a serious lecture. "You can't eat this." The cub blinked its innocent big eyes, then let out a burp and spat out a shiny computer chip. Charles looked at the chip in his palm and fell silent. He silently put the little one down, turned around, and called his assistant. "Order 100 of the latest model laptops, with the toughest shells." I happened to be passing by and casually scooped up the little one who was still trying to chew on the motherboard, patting his bottom. The little one immediately settled down, burying his head in my arms and whimpering as he snuggled. Charles watched the scene with a somewhat complicated expression. "It seems they only listen to you." There was a barely detectable hint of sourness in his tone. I shifted the child in my arms and said, "Perhaps I just have more authority." Charles glanced at my shoulder, damp with the child's drool, and remained silent. He started seeking me out more frequently, no longer just asking for parenting advice, but also sharing some trivial matters. For example, the project manager in North America seems to have lost their mind. "How dare they submit such a proposal?" Or, "Lily's family has been having some business troubles lately and came to plead for help, but I didn't meet with them." When he said these things, he would pretend to casually observe my reaction. I usually just hum in response or wipe the drool from the baby in my arms, reacting indifferently. He doesn't mind either and continues talking on his own, as if he just needs a listener. Once, he had a 12-hour international meeting in a row and was so exhausted that his eyes were red and his suit was wrinkled. When he returned to the baby area, he almost tripped over a baby crawling by at high speed. I was sitting on the carpet, watching a few babies clumsily trying to stack the blocks higher. He slumped down beside me, rubbing his temples, his voice weary. "So damn noisy." Before I could say anything, the few little ones who had been babbling around instantly fell silent as mice, even their crawling movements becoming lighter. Charles looked up in surprise, glancing around, then at me. I shrugged, indicating it had nothing to do with me. He stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly let out a low laugh, his shoulders trembling slightly. "Pomegranate," he said, "you really are quite a character." This was the first time he had called my name in such a tone. It wasn't as cold as before, nor as reverent as later, but carried a hint of something indescribable, curiosity and interest. He leaned back slightly, and his elbow accidentally brushed against my hand. Neither of us moved. The little ones were quietly crawling around on the carpet, occasionally making soft murmuring sounds. Sunlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling window, filling the air with the scent of milk and a faint aroma of pomegranate. It was very quiet, a bit too quiet. Charles suddenly spoke up, his voice very soft. "Giving you that check back then was my mistake." I was a bit surprised and turned to look at him. His eyes were fixed on the kids playing with building blocks in the distance, and the lines of his profile seemed less tense. "I didn't expect," he paused, as if searching for the right words, "the aftermath to be so spectacular." "It's a bit late to say that now." I pointed out the obvious. "The kids are already born." He turned to look at me, his gaze deep. "It's not too late." I didn't understand what he meant. He didn't explain either, just stood up, straightened his suit, and returned to his usual meticulous Mr. Green demeanor. "What flavor of soil would you like tomorrow?" he asked casually. "A batch just arrived by air from Norway. They say it's rich in minerals." "Taste it," I said. He nodded, took a few steps, then stopped and turned back to add, "I'll eat with you." I watched his retreating figure, wondering if I had misheard. "Accompany me to eat dirt." Charles, has his brain finally been fried by the kids? Charles ended up not being able to eat dirt with me. Lily pulled off something big. I don't know what method she used, but a company emergency call took Charles away. Lily brought a so-called enlightened master from some remote mountain valley, who was dressed in Taoist robes, holding a compass, and pointed at the villa, claiming it was filled with demonic energy that needed to be cleansed through rituals. The old Taoist set up his formation in the courtyard, ringing bells and sprinkling talisman water while chanting incantations under his breath. Lily stood by, wearing a smug expression as if waiting for a show. I was in the sunroom with the little ones, carrying out our daily photosynthesis. The little ones were a bit restless, as they disliked the noise and commotion. The old Taoist raised his peachwood sword toward me and shouted, "Evil creature, show your true form at once." I hadn't even spoken when the nearest kid suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a pomegranate seed, accurately knocking the peachwood sword out of the old Taoist's hand. The old Taoist was stunned. The other kids followed suit and began collectively spitting pomegranate seeds. For a moment, pomegranate seeds shot toward the old Taoist and Lily like bullets. The force wasn't strong, but it was extremely insulting, making slapping sounds as they hit and leaving a sticky mess. The old Taoist's robe was stained with red spots, and Lily's carefully styled hair was messed up as she screamed and dodged. The seeds covered both of them from head to toe, even obscuring their faces, as if they had just crawled out of a pile of kitchen waste. "Rebellion, rebellion." The old Taoist trembled with anger, his beard shaking, as he pulled out what he claimed to be a family heirloom demon collecting gourd and shook it fiercely at me. There was no reaction. I yawned again. "The sunshine is so nice today. Perfect for sleeping." The old Taoist refused to believe it was cursed and shook the gourd desperately, his face turning red with effort. The fastest crawling little one scurried over, grabbed the gourd, looked at it curiously, then opened its toothless mouth and took a big bite. Crack! The gourd shattered. The old Taoist stared at the ancestral treasure broken into two halves, his eyes nearly popping out of his head, pointing a trembling finger at the child. He stammered, You. The child looked up, grinning at him with a toothless gum. Lily's face twisted with rage as she shouted at me, disregarding all decorum. "Pomegranate, what kind of monster are you? These are not normal children at all." I couldn't be bothered with her, so I bent down to pick up the little one who was chewing on a gourd and dusted off his clothes. Just then, Charles's car screeched to a halt at the courtyard gate. He must have rushed back after receiving the news. Still in his suit, his face dark with anger, he strode in, first glanced at me to make sure I was okay, then shot a cold glare at Lily and the disheveled old Taoist. "Who gave you permission to come in?" His voice was low, but the pressure was intense. Lily immediately changed her expression, sobbing, "Brother Charles, I'm doing this for your own good." She really is a monster. These children are little monsters too. Look at what they've done to the master. Charles didn't even glance at the old man and directly ordered the bodyguards behind him, "Throw these two out. From now on, don't allow them to enter any of the Green family's properties." The bodyguards stepped forward at once. Lily couldn't believe it. "Brother Charles, you've been bewitched by her." Charles finally looked at her, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "Miss Smith, my wife and child are not for you to judge. If I hear even half a word more, your Smith family will cease to exist." Lily's face turned pale instantly, and she was still screaming as she was dragged away by the bodyguards. The old Taoist was already scared out of his wits, clutching the broken gourd as he fled in a panic. The courtyard instantly fell silent. Charles walked up to me and looked down at the child in my arms. The child was still smacking his lips, seemingly savoring the taste of the gourd. "Are you okay?" he asked me, his voice softening. What could possibly be the matter? I shifted the baby in my arms. "It's just a bit noisy." He fell silent for a moment, then suddenly reached out and very naturally tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed against my skin, feeling a little warm. "It won't happen again," he said. The baby squirmed in my arms, babbling and trying to grab Charles's tie. Charles didn't dodge as he usually would, instead allowing the chubby little hand to grab his expensive tie, even letting it get a bit of drool on it. He looked at me, his gaze deep. "Whatever it is," he said in a low voice, audible only to me. "It's mine." I looked up at him. The tips of his ears were slightly red, but his tone was serious, carrying an undeniable sense of possessiveness. "You, and them, all belong to me. Move, and you die." Wow, as expected of the domineering male lead, even his confession carries a murderous aura. I looked at the slightly red tips of his ears and that line, "Whoever moves, dies." I was just about to ask where he learned such cheesy pickup lines when the inherited memories in my mind suddenly buzzed. Before my eyes, a dazzling river of stars flashed, countless planets I had never seen before scattered like pomegranate seeds in the darkness, exuding an alluring, untamed fertility. My bloodline was boiling, every cell screaming, "Go there, go and sow seeds. Let pomegranate blossoms bloom across the universe." The temptation was too great, more alluring than all the premium soil Charles had airlifted combined. I instantly pushed that ambiguous feeling to the back of my mind. The universe. That's the universe, so much unknown territory waiting to be explored. Charles was still waiting for my response, his eyes filled with rare tension and anticipation. I suddenly grabbed his arm and said excitedly, "Charles, I've found a great place." He froze. "What?" "Bigger than the backyard, fatter than the earth." My eyes lit up. "Perfect for raising kids." "No, perfect for expanding into new markets." Charles didn't understand, but his instincts told him something was wrong. "Speak human language. I'm going to develop in space," I said succinctly, taking the kids to pioneer new frontiers. Charles's expression cracked. "Where are you going?" I didn't have time to explain. The inherited memories were guiding the way. I could feel a temporary spatial passage forming in the backyard, its energy fluctuations unusually intense. I turned and ran toward the backyard, using my racial ability to send a gathering command to all the little ones. 999 little ones instantly stopped whatever they were doing, turned their heads in unison, and then, like little soldiers receiving orders, quickly crawled after me. The scene was truly spectacular. For a moment, Charles watched in utter bewilderment as a swarm of fast-crawling kids, including me, surged toward the backyard like a tide. By the time he snapped out of it and chased after us to the backyard, he saw me standing in front of a suddenly appearing starlight flickering vortex, counting the number of kids. "Hurry, hurry, not a single one can be left behind." I urged the kids to crawl into the vortex. "Pomegranate," Charles's voice cracked. "What on earth are you doing? What the hell is that thing?" "New World Portal," I managed to shout back amidst the chaos. "Don't worry, I'll come back once I've planted pomegranate trees in every corner of the universe." Charles tried to rush over and grab me, but the chubbiest little one suddenly turned around, hugged his leg, and looked up at him babbling, as if trying to take Daddy along. In that brief moment of delay, the last few little ones also crawled into the portal. The vortex began to flicker unsteadily. I waved at Charles and said, "Take care of the house. Wait for my good news." After saying that, I turned around and jumped into the passage. At the last second, I saw Charles scoop up the chubby kid on his lap, his face ashen, almost roaring. "Pomegranate, how dare you run? Just you wait. I won't let you get away. To the ends of the earth. No, to the edge of the universe. I'll chase you down." The passage closed. I drifted in an unfamiliar sea of stars, feeling joyful. Behind me, 998 little ones blinked curiously, gazing at the vast universe. The first step into the universe. Success. It just feels like I forgot something. Never mind, I won't think about it. Let's find a planet that looks fertile and test the soil. Earth, Green Family Villa. Charles held the last chubby baby in his arms that he hadn't had time to throw into the portal, staring at the empty backyard, his chest heaving violently. A few minutes later, he calmed down, took out his phone, and dialed his assistant. His tone had returned to the icy composure of a domineering CEO, but the content was utterly absurd. "Immediately acquire a space company. The one with the most advanced technology, custom-build a starship that can accommodate 1,000 people, with the living quarters designed to the highest standards of a nursery. The shopping list includes unlimited formula, diapers, and soil samples in various flavors. Also, contact NASA and buy a few of the latest interstellar navigation charts. The assistant on the other end remained silent for a long time before trembling and asking, "Mr. Green, are you planning to?" Charles looked at the chubby baby in his arms gnawing on his finger and said through gritted teeth, chasing the wife, after hearing the story above, "What are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.